Hey, it's Mr. Burns here, and we're going to look at voting today. Voting in terms of what you need to do to register and participate in elections. So you should have your Cornell notes out, and you should follow along with the presentation, voter registration and participation. Okay. The first thing you need to know about voting is that it's a responsibility, and the responsibility of citizens is something that you do not need to do, but you should do. Okay, a duty is something you have to do, and there's consequences if you don't complete that. Voting is not a duty, it's a responsibility of citizens. And you notice how it's a responsibility of citizenship. You have to be a citizen to vote. Okay? Every vote is important. An election could come down to just a few votes, even one vote. You need to remember that your vote does count and is important. So before you go to vote, you can't just walk into your voting precinct or voting booth on the day of the election and say, I'm here to vote. You have to first register. Okay, and you have to be a citizen again to register. And there's a certain process that you can do. We're going to talk about that process. It's probably only citizens who register can vote. Okay, so there's two major types of elections. You might have seen this in your vocabulary. There is the primary election and the general election. The primary election is first. Think about primary school or primary colors. That means first. So that comes first. And it decides who will be running for office in each political party. Now this year, we had a bonus election. So we had a bonus primary. We had the Super Tuesday, March 1st, 2016, to determine who would be Virginia's candidate for the presidency in terms of the Republican Democratic Party. On November 8th, we have the general election this year, November 8th, 2016, and that's where the winners of the primaries compete. I'm going to use a sports analogy to explain this better. The primary election is like the playoffs. It's like you got to the playoffs, and now we have to determine which one candidate from the Republican Party and which one candidate from the Democratic Party, and even third parties, will be competing in the general election. So, in the playoffs, teams from the same division or the same conference go up against each other to get to the championship game. Whoever wins the most primaries and gets the most delegates gets into the championship game. The others do not. Okay, so an example here politically, Republican versus Republican. We had Donald Trump, we had Ted Cruz, we had John Kasich, we had Marco Rubio, we had Jeb Bush. On the Republican side, on the Democratic side, we had Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley as the main candidates. And of course, we know at this point that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton received the most delegates. They got to the general election. Okay? General election, that's like the Super Bowl. That's like the championship game. That's where the Republican and the Democrat, or a team from two different divisions or two different conferences, go against one another. So we'll have that on November 8th this year. Donald Trump for the Republican versus Hillary Clinton for the Democrat, and then you'll have a couple third-party candidates thrown in. Gary Johnson, Jill Stein for the Libertarian and Green parties will also be involved. Winner takes the office. Okay. Now, in order to become a voter, what do you have to have? What qualities or qualifications do you need? You have to be a citizen of the United States, born or naturalized. Okay. You have to be a resident of Virginia and of your precinct. Now, precinct is a local voting area that divides people generally equally. I live in Burke. I vote at the Commons in Burke. Okay, some of your parents might vote there as well. There's other districts, there's other precincts in the area where you might vote. A lot of times it's at a school, a lot of times it's at a community center, a fire hall, something like that. Okay, and the third is you have to be 18 years old on the day of the general election. So if you're 17 on the day of the primary, but you will be turning 18 before the general election, you can vote in the primary and in the general election. Okay, let's look at it for you all who are turning 18 in the future. If you turn 14 this year before November 3rd, 2016, you will be able to vote in the 2020 election, because that's November 3rd is when election day will be that year. And it is also the next presidential election. I hate to say it, but if you turn 14 after that date, you will be able to vote in 2021, but the first presidential election you'll be able to vote in is not till 2024. Okay? Good news, that 2021 election will be a new governor will be elected. So that's at least a important state election. Maybe not as important as the presidential election, but very important nonetheless. Okay, how to register to vote. There's a few different ways that you can register to vote. You can go to the Fairfax County Government Center at the registrar's office. This is the person who's in charge of registering people to vote. If you like to do it face-to-face. If you want to do a mail application, you can obtain your registration form at the DMV, at public libraries, government offices. You can register by mail. And you can also go online. I've included the website there where you can register. I'm sure most of you will do this form. It's pretty easy. It's very convenient for you. All right. Registration closes 22 days before the election. So if you haven't registered in 22 days before, this year it's October 17th, then it will take too long to process. You won't be able to vote in that election. So make sure before you turn 18, especially if your birthday is in October or November, that you do it early. Okay? All right. Now, who's going to vote? Why do people vote? You know, what are factors that determine who votes? Well, first of all, age. People who are older, who are more invested in the system, who've been working a long time, tend to vote more often than people who are younger and who have other things on their mind. Okay? Education. Generally, the people who are more educated tend to vote at a higher rate than people who are not educated. So people with maybe a college diploma or a master's degree or a doctorate or a law degree will vote more often than people with only a high school diploma or no high school diploma. And then income. If you make more money, you have more of a concern over what happens to your money. Maybe you don't want taxes raised on your salary or your income. Maybe you have a lot of investments and you want to make sure that people are that they're going to be protected by those serving in Washington or in your state or in your local government. So you'll vote more often. So age, education, income. One way to remember that: first three vowels of our alphabet: A, E, I. Okay. All right. Why don't people vote? Well, there's 4 reasons why people in our country do not vote or forget to vote or fail to vote. Okay. One is they don't care. They're not interested. Maybe the issues, the candidates, nothing going on that interests them. So lack of interest. All right. Number 2, failure to register. Forget to register, didn't register to vote. That's another reason. If you're not registered, you can't vote. Okay. Number 3, believe that vote does not count. Remember, every vote is important. It could come down to 1 vote, so your vote is important. But a lot of people think, oh, this guy is going to run away or this woman's going to run away in a landslide. My vote doesn't matter. Okay, and that's and number 4 is either too busy, no time, maybe traveling for work, maybe you work long hours, or just you have kids and you just can't make it there. A lot of times, that's a reason that people don't vote. And of course, in presidential elections, there tends to be a greater voter turnout those years, every 4 years, okay, than there does in years of state and local elections. Okay, in 2013, we had our gubernatorial election and our Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. Not as high of turnout as years of presidential elections. Here's a graphic that shows that. And the starred years are presidential years. You see that in Virginia, the starred years, higher voter turnout, lower turnout in the even numbered years in between. Of course, there was an election every year, 2001, 2003, etc., but lower those years. Okay. How can you, as a student, participate in the democratic process? Well, you can't vote at this point. You're not 18 yet, but you can participate in political campaigns. That's a community service or service learning opportunity, and that will get you involved in the political arena. If you enjoy that, that's something you can do. It's a responsibility of citizens to participate in political campaigns. You can also participate in classroom and online simulations. We'll do that throughout this unit, so you'll have the opportunity to do that. Okay? So think about, as you come into class, think about what is important to understand about this. Why is this idea of registering and participating in elections, how does that impact our political system? How does it impact political parties, and so on? So think about that. Any questions that you have about this presentation, bring in with you to class, and I'll be happy to answer them as we work on our voting stations in class.